This is entitled Shavuot, the experience of revelation. And of course, there are many ways to analyze the Holiday of Shavuot. I'm particularly interested in what was the experience of the revelation. And starting out with a Midrash, which has some notions you might have heard before, that all the souls that ever will be, that all will convert to Judaism, were at Sinai. And he goes on to say perhaps something that you never heard before, that even the prophecies till the end of time have their source at Sinai. In other words, God will determine when a prophet will live and when he needs to give his prophecy based on the needs of the Jewish people and Jewish history. But where did that inspiration come from? It came from Sinai. Likely great Torah scholars also got their inspiration for all time from Sinai. Now there's another Midrash which seems like it's really going to deliver for us, because it starts out analyzing the introductory phrase to the Ten Commandments, and it noticed something there which perhaps is going to yield what we want. It says, right? Elohim said all these things, saying, now the Midrash seems to be focused on the word all, saying, wow, all means it's more than the Ten Commandments. They heard the first two from God and the rest they heard from Moshe, but it seems like there's more that we're going to find out, more things that they got. But unfortunately, the Midrash stops there. It does not reveal what exactly they got. Instead, it just gives us a list of some of the unknowables of God, some of the conundrums. For example, that God can bring forth life and God can take life. God can injure and God could heal and God could do all these things at the same time. And God can listen to the desperate prayers of people who are in many different places all at the same time. And God creates light and darkness, and God turned the Nile into blood and back to water again. And God took the staff and turned it into a snake and back into a staff again. And God tells us to keep the Shabbat, yet somewhere else God tells us to break the Shabbat when we have to bring sacrifices in the temple. And God says don't have relations with your brother's wife, but yet elsewhere it says you should have a levirate marriage. So here you have all these conundrums. The Midrash does not tell us what this has to do with revelation. Along comes the commentator Eshen Nachalem and says, no, this is exactly what the list is about. The list is saying that because of the intense degree of prophecy that they got at Mount Sinai, these were no longer conundrums. They understood everything. It all made sense. You know, if two people try to talk to you at the same time, you say, hold on, I can't hear, put two people at the same time. But God is not limited by time and space or physical properties. So God can listen to hundreds and millions, an infinite amount of people at the same time and answer them. So it's taking a limitation of the human beings and saying this is not the case of God. So on that list was also, if you recall, that God turned the river into blood and back to the river again. And so why is that on the list if the soothsayers in Egypt could do it? So let's draw upon the inspiration of the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Lazuto, 18th century Kabbalist, who said that you have to understand that the early idol worshippers, their conception of how the world ran was limited to nature. They had ways of manipulating nature, and they thought that they really understood who is behind everything. But they knew nothing. They were actually in the dark, and God did not want to reveal to them how things worked, because that he was waiting until the revelation to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. So what's implied is that when the revelation happened and God revealed the inner workings of how about the world, they even understood that what the soothsayers did in Egypt was false and limited, because now they had a broad knowledge, and as we said, they had no contradictions. And to draw further with the Ramchal, we talked about things that are in the Torah that seem in contradiction. For example, keeping the Sabbath and bringing sacrifices to the temple, which breaks the Sabbath. And you can't have relations with your brother's wife, but then there's such a thing as a levirate marriage. So again, the Ramchal says that part of this intense prophecy and revelation was that they understood all these commandments in very, very great depth. And so again, there were no contradictions. What's really fascinating about the Ramchal is to sort of prove his point, he draws from psukim from V'etchanan. In Dvarim, Moshe reviews everything, the whole history of the Jewish people, and he even, of course, gives the Ten Commandments over again with one slight change. So, in retelling the story, and of course, this is part of Moshe's desperate attempt to give chizuk to the Jewish people because he knows that they're going to sin and they're going to go off the derech, and he's trying to strengthen them. And so he's basically, the words that he uses seem to echo with the thoughts of the Ramchal. I'll give you an example. You probably remember this. So think of what the Ramchal said, this deep level of prophecy, and now look at those words again, right? You knew because I revealed to you Hashem and Elokim, the God of justice and the God of loving kindness. You understood reward and punishment and the different ways and God acts in the world, and you knew that there was no other power in the world, and you understood, how people might have thought that it came from nature, but it wasn't. You understood all these workings. So Moshe is trying to give them strength. And one of the most dramatic psukim that he quotes is he says, if you can only take the intensity of this experience you had, and if you had successfully passed it on to your children, perhaps this could have sustained the Jewish people. Just absorbing and transferring this experience to your children. Don't be careful. Don't forget the intensity of what you experience. Don't let it leave your heart. Don't ever let it leave your heart, and transfer it to your children and your children's children. That could have been the key. So what is emerging from all this? It's funny because we talk about Kabbalah Torah, that we received the Torah, but in some sense, it's not that we received the Torah. First of all, we didn't learn the whole Torah. And it wasn't just a miraculous event, because we know that miracles don't last. It was an intellectual event. It was something that gave them clarity of God's inner workings. And it was so powerful, it could really have made a big difference. But it sort of kickstarted our relationship with God, because the truth is, the relationship with God really builds from learning Torah and from being connected to Torah and seeing God's beauty and wisdom in the Torah. But since they couldn't do that all at once, standing there at Sinai, so instead, God gave them this intense experience of prophecy, which kickstarted them into an intense relationship and an intense understanding of God's immense power and how He conducts the world. And that was what we were doing. We were trying to get the Torah without actually learning the Torah. It was trying to form a relationship through an intensity. And that is what I would conclude was the experience at Mount Sinai. Have a great Chag. Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to your comments below.